The Trump campaign's official spokesperson was finally confronted on live TV about Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans' relentless lies about the Biden-Harris administration's response to Hurricane Helene. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have one clip to look at here, and it's about 7 minutes long. It's the full interview between CNN host Kate Bolduan and Karoline Leavitt, who is the Trump campaign's official spokesperson. Leavitt has been on multiple networks over the past several months. She has been a subject of multiple videos of ours here at Pondering Politics. She's slippery. She's a pathological liar. She is the typical MAGA Republican media surrogate. And the interview between Bolduan and Leavitt is stunning because Bolduan is relentless here. Okay, CNN does a really good job of fact-checking and demanding answers. And finally, she cuts the interview off when Karoline Leavitt won't play ball. But just for context, I want to remind everybody, Republican governors of red states that have been impacted by Hurricane Helene have publicly praised the Biden-Harris administration's federal response, and Republican state and local officials have begged Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans to stop lying. So with that in mind, let's play this interview and we'll unpack it together.
Joining us right now is from the Trump campaign, is Trump's national press secretary for the campaign, Karoline Leavitt. Karoline, thank you for coming on. And the congressman there, he said that he doesn't necessarily like all that FEMA is doing, but he pointed out that it's damaging the rumors that that is what is happening, the rumors that are circulating. And with regard to that, things that the former president has said is FEMA funds were stolen to be used to house illegal migrants, that no one from FEMA was on the ground in North Carolina, that funds were being withheld from Republican areas of the state on purpose. None of that is true. The head of FEMA says that worse than it not being true, it is dangerous that if this is pushed and circulated for the people who are most in need of help. With that knowledge, is the former president going to stop saying this?
Well, first of all, Kate, let me just express our thoughts and prayers are with everyone in Western North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and now Florida, who are bracing for another devastating hurricane. The bottom line is that FEMA spent $1 billion on funding for illegal immigrants that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden let into the country. CNN and many mainstream media outlets reported that more than a month ago. Now, today, we find ourselves in a predicament where Americans are in dire situations in need of food and of water. And Secretary Mayorkas last week said that FEMA does not have sufficient funding to get through this crisis and through the rest of hurricane season.
The reason that FEMA doesn't have the funding to get through the rest of hurricane season is because of MAGA Republicans in Congress refusing to fund FEMA. President Biden and Vice President Harris have begged for additional funding for FEMA for months. And MAGA Republicans in Congress stripped FEMA of additional funding, of the sufficient funding necessary to get them through hurricane season. This is 100% the fault of Donald Trump's allies in Congress. I'll also point out that the funds that have gone to the southern border, FEMA disperses those funds, but FEMA is not responsible for taking those funds from the disaster fund. Okay, so the disaster fund, which goes to, helping people out in hurricane season, that is congressionally mandated, that's congressionally approved, and FEMA has not touched that. That has gone only to people who have been afflicted by Hurricane Milton, Hurricane Helene, and other natural disasters, okay? The funding that she's talking about was also congressionally approved for that purpose. So I want to be very clear about this. FEMA is not robbing Peter to pay Paul. They are not taking funds that could be used to help people in natural disasters and sending them to the southern border. That is not happening, and that is precisely what Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans want you to believe, that they're taking funds which could be used to help people in need of natural disaster relief, and instead are spending them on the southern border. That is not happening.
But Caroline,
speaking of Secretary Mayorkas,
Caroline, I wanted. We just had Secretary Mayorkas on, but no. But first, on that, let's keep to the facts, which is on that suggestion that Donald Trump did make, that they were stealing money from FEMA and using it, and it's all gone because they're using it to house migrants. That's not true. There's no disaster relief fund money that was going to house migrants.
I don't think the American people care which pocket the money came from. They do care that their tax dollars, 1 billion of their tax dollars, went towards housing migrants. That came from FEMA's funds. That is a fact. It is reportable, and it's very likely to assume that that money could have been reallocated to the disaster relief fund that now could be used to help our fellow Americans that are in need from these hurricanes. And I would like to finish my previous point, and I heard you had Secretary Mayorkas on the show. I hope that you asked him about why he was shopping at a luxury men's warehouse store last week in the midst of this crisis, or why Kamala Harris was fundraising in San Francisco when Hurricane Helene made landfall, and why Joe Biden was sitting on the beach. If President Trump had done that, there would be outrage, and there should be outrage at our current elected officials, leaders in office who were sitting on their hands when this hurricane.
Karoline.
So again, just want to make this very clear. The President of the United States and Vice President of the United States and former presidents of the United States, like Donald Trump and Barack Obama, have enormous security details which are mandated by law. Okay, I think it was a former Trump official, or it was on Fox News. It was a former, state government official who's like, listen, when these people go anywhere, they have 50 Secret Service vans that go with them. State and local officials, often Republican, were begging President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Donald Trump and other people like them to stay out of these areas because it would distract and divert from limited resources. Donald Trump went in heedless anyway because all he cared about the photo was the photo op of him being there. He didn't actually do anything to help anybody. Whereas President Biden and Vice President Harris coordinated the federal response, sending boots on the ground, sending resources to these states. They did infinitely more for the people afflicted by Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton than Donald Trump ever did, and that's a fact.
Was making landfall on the United States. There was
Caroline,
a
I
delayed
did actually, I did,
response from
I
the
did
federal
ask,
government. There is
I
no
did
doubt about
ask
that.
the
It took them
secretary.
6 days to deploy troops.
I did ask.
hope
I
that you
did, Caroline. I did. That's what I'm trying to say. I did ask him about that. He said he was actually in Los Angeles, recognizing the work of employees of the Department of Homeland Security that are part of what we're talking about here. But let me ask you something. This is quite. So what I've heard, what you're now saying is that you think it is. You don't think American people care where the money comes from. You think it is bad that they're using FEMA money to house migrants. Ironically, Donald Trump attempted something very similar to what he falsely now is claiming about them. In 2019, Trump used FEMA. Let me finish. Trump used money from FEMA's disaster fund for migrant programs at the southern border. He told Congress that he was intending at the time in 2019 to shift $271 million from DHS, including $155 million from FEMA's disaster relief fund, to pay for detaining and transporting undocumented immigrants. Less than that was transferred from less than the $150 million was transferred, but money was transferred by Donald Trump in 2019 and the Trump administration from the FEMA disaster relief fund to house migrants. So is he then okay with moving disaster relief funds for dealing with migrants, but now is not?
So before Karoline Leavitt responds, I also want to say Trump did that in hurricane season in 2019, when the disaster relief fund should have been maximally funded in accordance with congressional law and congressional appropriations. Donald Trump did rob Peter to pay Paul. He did take those funds dedicated for disaster relief and use them towards the southern border, which, again, certainly unethical, potentially even unlawful, given that it defied congressional appropriations. But he did the very thing that he accused President Biden of doing that Biden did not do: pure hypocrisy and lies. And speaking of which, let's get back to Karoline Leavitt.
Is that what you're saying?
What President Trump didn't do is allow an open border policy for 4 years, allowing nearly 20 million illegal people into the country, stressing our public infrastructure in cities across the country, using taxpayer dollars to fund illegals and put them in luxury hotels like we've seen in New York City, to give them prepaid debit cards to buy clothing and food when the American people are suffering from the worst.
It's okay for Donald Trump to do it. It is not okay for the Biden administration to do it. Caroline, it's okay. Donald Trump did that. Donald Trump did that in 2019, his administration.
President Trump did not allow an invasion of illegal immigrants into our country again and use billions of dollars to fund them in housing, to put them into luxury hotels. What he did do is use federal funding to deport them back to their home countries, which is something that Kamala Harris is refusing to do. And she has still yet to answer the question that if she is elected president in 28 days, what is she going to do with the 20 million illegal people that she has allowed into this country, including the convicted criminals? We know there's 425,000 convicted criminal illegal aliens in this country today. Kamala has yet to say whether or not she will deport them or keep.
I should also say, we've talked about this in previous videos, those 425,000 criminals in the United States from other countries, the vast majority of them entered under previous administrations. That was over a span of 40 years, including the Trump administration. But Karoline Leavitt, liar that she is, wants you to believe that 425,000 criminals came from other countries under the Biden-Harris administration. That is not true. Just a total lie.
Keep them here and continue to use federal funding to house them and to give that, subsidize their lifestyle on the taxpayers' dime. President Trump won't tolerate that. He's going to launch the largest mass deportation operation in American history, and he will ensure that American citizens are being put first by their federal government, that their tax dollars are going to them in times of need. And this is not the first time we've seen the White House and the Biden-Harris administration botch a crisis. We saw
So just want to also say that it was recently confirmed that Donald Trump sent COVID-19 tests to Vladimir Putin at a time when those tests were extremely rare. Millions of Americans were seeking those tests to avoid death and infection. Hundreds of thousands of Americans were dying. And Donald Trump took limited resources and put America last by sending some of those precious resources to a foreign dictator. So again, Donald Trump really doesn't have a good record of putting America first. And again, Donald Trump did rob from FEMA's Natural Disaster Fund in order to send it to the southern border, which is something President Biden has not done.
In Afghanistan, they left Americans behind there. We saw it in East Palestine, Ohio, where Kamala Harris never visited and Joe Biden took months to actually go to tour the devastation from the train derailment. We saw it in Maui, Hawaii, where residents are still saying the federal government was not there to help them. This situation is no different, and we will take the word of residents in North Carolina and Florida and Georgia who have been left behind over the word of this administration, which has repeatedly been caught in lies.
Also, the word of a Republican member of Congress who says that these rumors that Donald Trump has been pushing, in part, the things he's been saying is not true. You say that you haven't heard Kamala Harris answer a question. I'm just going to leave it here. But I'm not hearing you answer the question of why it was okay for the Trump administration to use disaster relief funds in order to deal with migrants in 2019, and it is now completely not okay and something he's hitting the administration on now. We're going to leave it there because I offered you 3 times to give me the answer, and I'm not getting it.
Right. So again, what the Trump campaign has at the end of the day, total lies, deflection, hypocrisy. Donald Trump did the thing he accused Biden of doing. Biden didn't do the thing that Trump accused him of doing. But even if he did, to Kate Bolduan's point, then Donald Trump would still be guilty of hypocrisy, because if it's okay for Trump to do it, it should be okay for Biden to do it, unless, of course, you're an unprincipled loser, which MAGA Republicans often are, unfortunately. But yeah, that was an excellent interview by Kate Bolduan on CNN. Karoline Leavitt just deflected and lied per usual. And at the end of the interview, or rather as the interview went on, when CNN didn't get actual answers one way or another to their questions, they ended the interview. That's the way to treat the Trump campaign and MAGA Republicans. So in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.